but I'm listed as not a host. So I need to be, Maria, can I be a co-host, please?
Yes, Rabbi.
Thanks. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. We have a minute.
Shabbat Shalom.
Hi, Douglas. Just saw your mom. This is, such a momentous Shabbat, and I'm going to tell you why. Because I'm wearing slacks on the bima for the first time in 3 years. And I'm sure if Grandma Morrison is watching, she is nonplussed with me wearing slacks, but they're sensible. So we are going to begin this Shabbat. I'm Rabbi Amy Morrison, joined on the bima by our cantor Rochelle Nelson. Oh, on the drums, Ezra Morrison. That's a good idea. On the piano, Pat Seymour. In the sound booth, Grammy, Latin and American Grammy Award-winning sound technician Maria Yerbe. Jeannie Bernard, back from her travels in Chicago, is representing our custodial team. Paula Xanthopoulou is running AV. And I believe Brian Kellert, our Director of Lifelong Learning, is representing our senior staff. This evening, that is so many people to be excited to see, but the other people I'm excited to see are all of you. It is great to have a sanctuary that has people in it, and to see a screen that also does Linda and Fred Friedman coming in all the way from Miami, North Miami on the screen. We're going to begin with a song called Sabbath Peace, a song by Beth Schaefer.
Oh, Sabbath peace, come into my heart. Oh, Sabbath peace, please be in my prayers. Pour from my mouth and shower the children with your song, and dance with your tunes in their heads till you have to sing along. Yay, lay, lay, la la lay, la la lay, la 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 lay, la la lay, la la lay, 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 la la lay, la la lay, la 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 lay, 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 la la lay, la la lay, ya lay, la lay, la lay, la la lay, la la lay, 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 la la lay, la la lay, la 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 lay. Oh, Sabbath peace, come into my home. Oh, Sabbath peace, waken in my soul. Stretch out your warm, loving arms and embrace me like a friend. Then linger with me all through the week until you come again. Lay, 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 la la lay, la la lay, la la lay, la lay, la la lay, la la lay, 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 la la lay, la la lay, la la lay, la lay, 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 la la lay, la la lay. La 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 la.
Thank you to Jeannie and Mark, who had the percussion in the back. This evening's flowers are stunning, aren't they? The sunflowers. I want to thank congregant Brian Leslie for sponsoring this evening's flowers, and I know that they will be up tomorrow for the bar mitzvah of Mateo Scheingoltz, which is something we're all extremely excited about. And this evening, it is my honor to ask Susan and Bruce to come up and light our Shabbos candles. Susan, of course, will be speaking at our Lev of Legends program after services, immediately after services, so I hope you snacked before you came, as we will be snacking on some words of wisdom and of memory, as opposed to oneg. Shabbat shalom, guys. You want this or that? Either.
Push that in.
Oh, there you
go.
New grandparents. That's what I'm most excited about. Here, guys. There he goes.
There's nothing like matches. Ah, she did it.
Oh, you knew Melech. Amen.
Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat.
Amen. Shabbat
Amen.
Shalom.
Shabbat
Thank you, guys. We look forward to hearing from you. We have welcomed in Shabbat, but we have not yet welcomed one another, so I invite you, wow, that is a lot of people on the screen. I invite you to welcome one another on the screen and to welcome one another in the sanctuary with a Shabbat Shalom, with a check-in of how the week has gone and some blessings for each other as we move forward into this Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom to Alan Schulman, which may be Rebecca in the sanctuary. I don't know which one. To iPhone, good to have you always. Brian Leslie, to Fran and Alice, Gary Lee, to Jerry, Ian Reese, Yvonne, to Jacob, to Jill, to the other Jill, to Judy and Judith, to Linda and Fred, to Linda Searles, Mark Teitelbaum, to Michael, to Richard, to Sarah Leviton, to my parents, my grandparents, to Susan, to Auntie Vet, to so many that are on the screen, and so many that are also on YouTube. It is great to have everyone here as we come together to sing the songs of Kabbalat Shabbat beginning on pages 15 and 16. If you don't know the words, that's okay.
You can find the words at the bottom of page 15. It starts with the last two lines of Hebrew, which is also transliterated. Hari'u ladonai. La na 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 ya na 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 L'Adonai kol haaretz, L'Adonai kol haaretz, L'Adonai kol haaretz. Ki hitvu v'ranenu v'zameinu, v'zameru v'nameinu, v'ranenu v'zameinu. Na 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 Zamru l'Adonai bechinor, bechinor, v'kol zimra. Zamru l'Adonai bechinor, v'kol zimra. Okay, guys, get ready to dance. If you want to get out of your seat, you can do that too. Here we go. Na 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 na, ya na 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 na, ya na 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 na.
Ryan's clapping. Page 24, Shalom Aleichem.
Shalom Aleichem, Malachi Hasharet, Malachi Elyon, Mimelech Malachi Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shalom Aleichem, Malachi Hasharet, Malachi Elyon, Mimelech Malachi Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shalom Aleichem, משרת מלאכי עליון מלך מלאכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא בואכם לשלום מלאכי השלום מלאכי עליון ממלך מלאכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא בואכם לשלום מלאכי השלום מלאכי עליון ממלך מלאכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא בואכם לשלום מלאכי השלום מלאכי עליון ממלך מלאכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא ברכוני לשלום מלאכי השלום מלאכי עליון ממלך מלאכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא ברכוני לשלום מלאכי השלום מלאכי עליון ממלך מלאכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא יאי לי לה 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 יאי לי לה 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 everyone יאי לי לה לה יאי לי לה 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 יאי לי לה יאי לי לה 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 יאי לי לה one more verse צאתכם לשלום מלאכי השלום מלאכי עליון ממלך מלאכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא צאתכם לשלום מלאכי השלום מלאכי עליון ממלך מלאכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא יאי לי לה 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 יאי לי לה לה יאי לי לה יאי לי לה 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 Lai lai, yay lai lai lai, lai lai lai, yay lai lai lai.
Page 20.
Lecha dodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela. Sha'amor וזכור בדיבור אחד השמיענו אל המיוחד אדוני אחד ושמו אחד לשם ותפארת ולית הילה לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה לקראת שבת ובנלכה כי היא מקור הברכה בראש בי קדם משוכה סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה התעוררי התעוררי כי באורך קומי אורי 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 שיר דברי כבוד אדוני עלייך חמלה דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה.
Please rise as we face the door for verse 9.
בואי בשלום עטרת בעלה גם בשמחה וצהלה תוך אמוני עם סגולה בואי חלם בואי חלם
We join each other.
לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה יאללה לה 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 יאללה 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 לה 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 יאללה לה 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 לה
I invite you to remain standing as we face the ark and join together in our call to worship, the Baruch Hu, page 28. Promise I'll let you sit down soon.
La la la, ya la la la, ya la 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 la, la la la, ya la la la, la 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 ya 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 ya, ya la 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 ya la ya la 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 ya la ya, la 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 la, la 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 ya la ya la la. Adonai HaMevorach, Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed, Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed. La la la, ya la la la, ya la la ya 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 la, la la la, ya la la la, ya la ya la ya ya la.
You may be seated. We join together on page 29. If you are following at home, I invite you to check out the link to the prayer book that you will find in the chat. O God, you are as near as the very air we breathe, yet farther than the farthest most star. We yearn to reach you. We seek the light and the warmth of your presence. Though we say you are near, we are lonely and alone. Oh, let our desire be so strong that it will tear the veil that keeps you from our sight. Let your light release our darkness and reveal the glory and joy of your presence. Amen.
Amen.
On page 30, we arrive at Ma'ariv Aravim, our prayer that thanks God for a day that we've had, great or not so great, we were given this day, and ask God that as we lie down this evening to sleep, that we wake up once again renewed with new opportunity and new chance to make it the best day yet. We join together on page 30. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bidvaro ma'ariv aravim, b'chokhmah poteach she'arim, u'v'tvina meshane itim, u'machalif et hazmanim, u'mesader et hakochavim b'mishmeratehem barakia kirtsono, borei yom v'layla, golel or mipnei choshech, v'choshech mipnei or, u'ma'avir yom uvein layla, Umavdil bein yom uvein laila, Adonai tzvaot shemo. El chai v'kayam tamid yimloch alenu leolam va'ed.
Baruch atah Adonai
Baruch Shemo.
HaMa'ariv Aravim.
Blessed are you, Adonai, who brings on the evening. Amen.
Amen.
We continue now with the singing of Ahavat Olam on page 32. No, we're going to read it in English.
No, we're gonna sing it, but the traditional one, not the Debbie Friedman. Ahavat Olam.
Cantor's going to sing.
Right? Then I'll sing it. Ahavat Olam, Beit Yisrael, Amcha, Torah u'mitzvot, chukim u'mishpatim, otanu limadeta. Al ken Adonai Eloheinu, b'shokbeinu u'v'kumeinu, nasiach b'chukecha, v'nizmach b'divrei Toratecha, u'v'mitzvotecha, le'olam va'ed. Ki hem chayenu v'yorech yameinu, v'yorech yameinu, u'vahem negei yomav v'layla, yomav v'layla. V'atachal tasim mimenu le'olamim, Baruch atah Adonai,
Baruch Shemo.
Ohev amo Yisrael.
Amen. I'm going to invite up Lara and Jesse and Ezra and Reagan to come help us in leading of the Shema. I invite the congregation to please turn to page 34 and rise if you are able.
Can I light it?
We're not lighting anything. You guys ready? 1, 2, 3.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem, Kevod Malchuto, Leolam Vaed.
You may be seated. Nice job.
Rabbi, since Laura just had her bat mitzvah, do you think I could invite her to chant the Ve'ahavta?
I think that is cruel to do to a 13-year-old on the spot, but if Laura wants to, she is welcome to join all of us in the Ve'ahavta. We continue now on the following page with the chanting of the Ve'ahavta, page 36. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavecha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol me'odecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom ha'levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta ba'am v'shiftecha v'veitecha uv'lechtecha v'derech uv'shokbecha uv'kumecha uv'shartam leot ayadecha v'hayu letotafot beinenecha u'chtavtam al mezuzot beitecha uv'isharecha leman tizkeru ve'asitem ekol mitzvotai ve'item kedoshim lelohechem ani Adonai Elohechem asher hotzeitiachem me'eretz Mitzrayim lehiot lachem lelohim ani Adonai Elohechem Adonai Elohechem emet. Nice. That is brave. That is what being a Jewish young woman is about. We continue now with our prayer for peace, our prayer Micha Mocha, which we just got off of, I feel like the Micha Mocha holiday of Passover. But we must remember that as long as there are people who still need to find freedom in their lives, freedom, not only physical freedom, but mental and spiritual and emotional freedom, that we must look around us and bring them into us and help them get the freedom that our people, the Jews, received as we completed our Exodus. So we join together on page 40.
Who is like you, Adonai? Who is like you, Adonai? Ya la la la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nehedar b'kodesh. No ratehilo, osefele, no ratehilo, osefele. Everybody on the yalala. Yalala, 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 yalala,
Page 41, I invite you to read together with me. Sing the song of men and women joined in understanding and respect, the song of God's miracles, an earth protected and cherished, a gift for our children and the generations to come. The song of a land once ravished by war, now quiet and content, her soldiers home to leave no more, the song of a world redeemed, the song of peace. As we look at this beautiful Bertha Abbess sanctuary, look up, look all around, we are supported, we are sheltered by gorgeous walls and stained glass, memorial lights and memories. And we think of how this shelter is so symbolic also of the arms, kanfei ha-shekhinah, that God protects us with, these wings of protection. And then we think about our lives and who we protect and who protects us. We think about those who call us randomly, who send us notes, who ask for recipes. We think about all of those who shelter us and who we shelter. Those fur babies that we think of every single week who give us so much love, and those real babies that do as well. Those who are no longer with us, but who nurtured us to be the people we are today. And we continue with this prayer, thanking God for all of the different types of shelter in our lives. Page 42, you can find the words of Hashkivenu.
Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom, l'shalom. V'hamidenu shoreinu l'chaim. Ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha, ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha. Shelter us beneath thy wings, O Adonai. Guard us from all harmful things, O Adonai. Keep us safe throughout the night, till we wake with morning's light. Teach us, God, wrong from right. Amen. 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 Amen.
Continue now on page 46. I invite the congregation to rise. If you are able, we face east towards Jerusalem for the words of the Amidah.
Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi yagi tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu Imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, v'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, v'Konei Hakol, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה. מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה. Page 50. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, בחיי הכל אתה רב להושיע, מוריד אתה. מכלכל חיים בחסד, בחיי הכל ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, umatir asurim, umekayem emunato lishenei afar, michamocha ba'al gevurot, umidom melach, melech memit umechayeh, umatzmiach Yeshua, v'ne'amanat halachayot hakol, Baruch atah Adonai, mechayeh hakol. Atah kadosh v'shimcha kadosh, u'kadoshim b'chol yom yahalelucha selah. Baruch atah Adonai, ha'el hakadosh.
You may be seated as we join together on the top of page 55 in English. May these hours of rest and renewal open our hearts to joy and our minds to truth. May all who struggle find rest on this day. May all who suffer find solace. May all who hurt find healing on this day. May all who despair find purpose. May all who hunger find fulfillment on this day, and may this day fulfill its promise. Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh ha-Shabbat. Amen.
Amen.
We turn now to page 58. On page 58, we have our prayer of gratitude, asking God. Actually, on 58, we have not our prayer of gratitude, our prayer asking God to accept our prayers. But if we continue through the Amidah, we arrive at a prayer where we are just so thankful and grateful for being here today and for being alive. And so I ask you at home to share that you are grateful for in the chat. And if anyone in the sanctuary has a moment of gratitude, if you'll just share that with each other. I understand we are so excited for Susan to speak that we are going to keep our gratitudes to each other. I see a lot of head nods. Maybe that's what people want. I like to hear it. But go ahead and share your gratitudes with each other, and then we will come back and mark them as holy. Baruch atah Adonai hatov shimcha ochana lehodot. Amen.
Amen.
We take some time now for Tefillat Halev, for the prayers of our hearts. So I invite you to close your prayer books, to open your minds, to find those words that only you can speak. We will join following this silent meditation in a prayer for peace on page 60.
Shalom Rav, Al Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav, Al Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Leolam. Grant us peace, give us courage to face another day. Let your words of hope call us to pray. In every time and season, every heart must be open. In our prayers and blessings, that's when love is spoken. Shalom Rav, Al Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Gather us, your people, in friendship and hope. Israel, a shelter for all. In every time and season, every heart must be open. In our prayers and blessings, that's when love is spoken. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim.
Cantor, that was a new ending to that song.
Yeah, that's why it was so beautiful that I decided not to sing and just let everyone enjoy it.
That was God.
That was God.
No, we clearly are having some challenges with our mics, so excuse that, but I know Maria is working on that. It is a good time for me to speak because your mic is having a challenge. So last week, Jim and Sarah said, Rabbi, I'm so excited. I have the best idea. Come off the bima and talk to us. And I said, oh, Jim, that's very frightening, but I'm going to come off the bima and speak to you. Again, I'm wearing slacks. Sorry, Grandma. You already texted me about it. So this Shabbat, we are again in the Torah portion of Acharei Mot, after death. And tomorrow, Mateo is going to be speaking about it. And we spoke about it last week, and so we don't need to speak about it again right now. I'm going to let him teach us. But what I want to, Ezrash, what I want to talk about tonight actually has to do exactly with that. I want to talk about the Book of Leviticus that we're in right now. We went through Genesis. We learned about all the people that came before us, the messy family relationships, life cycles, pregnancies that don't happen, marrying two people, family relationships that are messy, and life that is real. Characters in our Bible, in our Torah that are real, like us. And then we get to the Exodus, and we read about our slavery. We read about the Jews who were slaves. They didn't build the pyramid exactly, but we did do a lot of things against our will. We had no autonomy. And we did exactly what we were told because death was the punishment for not doing what we were told. We lived through the plagues. We see God in a way that maybe we don't understand, a God that kills the firstborn of Egyptians, a God that I wrestle with, that I struggle with, trying to understand how that's the same God that we give gratitude to during our prayers. And then we're freed. Pharaoh says, get out of here, which we know is really God through Pharaoh saying, get out of here. Ezra. Sorry, guys. It's hard. It's single mom right now. But then we're let loose and we go across the sea, right? We go across and the waters part. And we say, God is still with us. God is still with us. And then we wander for 40 years in the desert before we get to the Torah and Mount Sinai. We are wandering. We're no longer slaves. We're no longer told what to do every single waking moment. We're told nothing. And in that fear and in that anxiety and in that lack of rules and guidelines, we build a golden calf. Neighboring groups were doing it. We didn't know where our God was, right? God did this miracle, the last miracle we saw, with the waters parting. So then we arrive at the Book of Leviticus, this book of laws. And we often talk about, well, why so many rules? Why is it a whole book of rules? The next Torah portion, the end of this Torah portion is messy, especially for the GLBTQ community. There's so much going on that talks about what to eat and what not to eat, who to sleep with, who to love, who not to love. It's all rules. Why is this on the tail end of freedom? So I want to ask you, what are some rules you remember from childhood that maybe didn't make so much sense at the time? Yes, Jim, you made me come down here, so you better. Go to bed at a certain time. Who decided that one, right? Right? Yeah, Lee.
Take your shoes off when you enter the house, my mom used to say.
Take your shoes off when you enter the house. I'm going to repeat you guys so that people at home hear. What else? What are some other rules? What? Don't cross the street by yourself. We weren't allowed to go to 7-Eleven across the street. It was really upsetting until middle school. What else? Oh, the people at home. Yeah. What other rules? Yeah, Jim. Yeah, why? Make your bed before you leave the house. You're going to get in it that night, right? What is the point? Yeah.
Don't play with matches.
Okay, that one's true though, Lee. Let's watch that one. Don't play with matches is a really good rule. We have all these rules. We have all these guidelines. Why do we start as young kids with our young kids, whether they're ours by birth or just ours around us? Why do they need rules? But like, really, why do they need rules? What do rules create? Structure. What comes with structure? Discipline, security. Mark, what'd you say? Society, societal norms. Safety. Not just health and safety in terms of the actual literal safety, but that sense of, predictability. You know that there's something going to catch you, that there's a parent, that there's an adult, that there's someone who is setting out boundaries for you, right? And so I think about this book of Leviticus as our boundary setter, as our parent, as God through laws. We knew what to do as slaves. We didn't get to have any autonomy. We were told what to do. But then all of a sudden, we have another book to get to where we're going to go into the promised land, and we have to somehow traverse and understand our lives in between slavery and complete freedom. And so we're given this time to wander through the desert. And while we're wandering, we're acquiring all these rules. We're told item by item how to build a mishkan, how to build this temporary dwelling spot for God. We're told what the outfits of the Kohanim have to look like. Every single thing is laid out for us. And so why? Why are we given all this? And I think the understanding is that we have to be taught and modeled how to create boundaries for ourselves, how to create safety and guidelines for ourselves. For an entire generation and multiple generations prior to that, they didn't have to create any of that. It was given to us. But now we're wandering and we're about to be a free people and we have no clue how to do it. So I was thinking about boundaries and guidelines and rules for organizations, for societies, for families, this idea of norms, as you said. What does that do to a group of people who are separate when everyone has the same rules? Unites them. What united us prior to all these rules? Slavery. We didn't have a choice what rules to follow. We certainly didn't learn, as Reformed Judaism says, knowledge through education. We didn't learn choice through knowledge. Rules sometimes, guidelines sometimes, boundaries and borders and norms sometimes allow us to create a unity that would not happen if we were all doing our own thing. When we arrive at the door of the promised land, who goes in? Does anyone remember? Or let me say it differently. Who doesn't go in? Moses doesn't go in. And who does he represent? What? Elaine? The past. You're absolutely right. Be proud. The past. No person enters the promised land that was ever a slave. Nobody. Because the idea is when you've not known what a social norm is, what a rule is, what a guideline is, what safety through these norms create, then you have this mentality of, I'm just going to do what I'm told. So this group spends an entire book, the entire book of Leviticus, coming together through all these rules. We often say, oh, don't get a Torah portion in the book of Leviticus if you're a bar bat mitzvah kid. It's just a lot of lists and rules and guidelines. But the idea is without those, we wouldn't have the safety, we wouldn't have the unity of what it means to come together as a Jewish people, and we wouldn't be ready to go into the promised land. I think it's so important that once we get to the book of Deuteronomy, we can look back and we can say, wow, we've gone through everything together. Generations have gone through everything. We stand on the shoulders of those who came before us. That's important. That's a lifeline. But those people who went into the promised land, they have no memory themselves of slavery. They have no memory of the past. They honor it, but they're moving forward. And so as we move past Passover, as we move towards Shavuot, where we're going to receive the Torah in our Torah year, if that makes sense, we're about to receive the Torah. We're counting the Omer right now, the 40 days between Passover and Shavuot. Once we get that Torah, what we do with it is up to us. What they did with it is incredible, but what we do with it is just as incredible. So let us come together in our own understanding of laws, our own understanding of norms, of guidelines, of boundaries. Let us redefine it, reinvigorate it. Let us reunite so that we can figure out what that means going forward. What worked then can help inform what will work next. But we have to go through our own process of messiness, our own desert dwelling, our own wandering and wrestling for us to move forward. I look forward, literally, to this next week and this next Shabbat. I hope you'll join me tomorrow in Matteo Steingold's family as he reads from the Torah. And I hope that, as we've always done at our synagogue, we support our youngest Jewish adults as they read from the Torah. They are incredible. You can see tonight, Laura stood up there, more brave than I think we could have imagined that we would be as a 13-year-old standing up there. And so I hope this Shabbat we are blessed with the understanding that sometimes rules and guidelines and norms, no matter how messy they are, prepare us to move forward as a more cohesive group. Shabbat Shalom.
אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם שגמר לנו כל טוב כל טוב כל טוב אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם שגמר לנו כל טוב כל טוב כל טוב another chance, another breath, another moment to be blessed, another look, another touch, another moment to be loved. Kol tov, kol tov, kol tov, kol tov, kol tov, kol tov, kol tov.
We continue now with our words of healing, our prayer for Misha Berach. If there's anyone who you're thinking of or you yourself are in need of a prayer for healing, I invite you at home to enter those names into the chat, and we will take the names from the sanctuary as well, and then we'll join together on page 253. Any names for healing?
Jay Johnson.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Brian. Melissa. Jim. Susan. Guys, any names for healing? The Ukraine, yeah. Okay, yes. Thank you so much. We take all of their names into our hearts and we join together now, page 253.
Be
pray for refuat hanefesh, for refuat haguf, for refuah shleima, a complete and total healing of body, mind, and of spirit, and let us say, Amen. As I mentioned, we are in the period of counting the Omer between Passover and Shavuot, and so I invite you to page 278, where we will join in the announcement of the day for this, the 14th day of the counting of the Omer.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kirishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al sefirat ha'omer hayom 14 yom shehem shnei shavuot la'omer. Today is 14 days, which are 2 weeks of the Omer.
As we continue to work through our 40 days, it is interesting. You can go online and find so many places that are counting the Omer, giving you something to think about each day of the Omer. I encourage all of you to do so. I'm going to now call up Adam and Julia, who are going to be getting married in Connecticut soon. I will be flying out to do that wedding. This morning they went and submerged in the ocean. We did a mikvah this morning in anticipation of their wedding, and so I invite them to come up to the ark. We're not going to open it, so you don't have to stand yet, but I'm going to have you guys stand over there as the cantor, and I give you this blessing. As we stand here tonight in front of the ark, I ask this congregation to bless you, Julia and Adam. Just go ahead and turn your mic off. And share words of holiness to mark this moment. May you know one another fully and completely and come to learn and love each other's light and darkness, each other's blessings and shortcomings. May God bless you with messiness and murkiness, with forgetting where one person stops and the other begins, with reminders that good intentions and being on the same team should be the root of all dialogue and disagreements. May you spread a love for all people of all nations and creeds, and may your deeds of kindness be as numerous as the stars in heaven and the sands on the sea. And may you be blessed with the ability to share the love you have for one another with any and every divine spark that you each encounter. And may you know joy. May each other's laughter be the question you spend your life trying to answer. May you serve to make life's quakes gentler and life's shakes steadier for one another. May you be blessed with the life of finding joy despite or perhaps amidst the trembles. And lastly, may you find and create holiness in the whispered I love yous and in the humbled I'm sorries. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Adam and Julia, may you both always be blessed with the capacity and the lifelong desire to seek out God, Judaism, community, and love in all you do. Amen. We join in this blessing.
Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha.
Keni hi ratzon, may God bless you and keep you.
Yair Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka.
Keni hi ratzon, may God's countenance shine upon you and through you.
Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom.
And may a feeling of God go through you so that you can bring peace into this world. Amen.
Amen.
Mazel tov.
Simen Tov. Simen Tov, Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov, Simen Tov, Simen Tov, Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov, Simen Tov,
Simen tov, mazel tov, mazel tov, simen tov, yelanu. Adam and Julia, you're getting lots of mazel tovs online, and we cannot wait to, I hope you all saw the e-blast this morning with the announcement and their gorgeous picture with their puppy, and we can't wait to celebrate with you when you come back from your wedding next month. We are going to invite the congregation to please rise as we join in the Aleinu, page 282. We open the ark. Aleinu l'shabeach
Adon hakol, latei g'dula leotzer breshit, shelo asanu ki goyei ha'aratzot, velo samanu k'mishpachot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkeinu kahem, וגור עלינו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסד הארץ, ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינתו זו בגובה מרומים. הוא אלוהינו אין עוד, מלכנו אפס זולתו, כך כתוב בתורתו. ידעת היום והשבות אל לבבך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל, והארץ מתחת. אין עוד ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ. ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד. You may be seated. Our thoughts now lovingly turn to those who are no longer with us physically, but who are with us in how we live our lives and how we interact with everyone in our lives. This Shabbat, we are thinking of course, all of those who perished in the Shoah as we honored Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day, yesterday, and we think about all of those in our lives and all of those in our world who left us to say Kaddish for them. In a moment, we'll read the names of those in our congregation who we're thinking of, but first at home, I invite you to enter any names you're thinking of into the chat, and in a moment, I'll ask in the sanctuary. Still in the 30 days of mourning of Shloshim, we think about Maury Rosenberg. We add in the yahrzeit, in the yearly memorial, the following names: Lena Arbeit, Geraldine K. Bellens, Simon M. Bressler, Albert Chaucer, Lorianne Cohen, Gisela Datko, Joseph J. Datko, Laura Dubin, Joseph Epstein, Sam Finkelstein, Daisy B. Fisher, Richard E. Gerstein, Esther Libby Gold, Samuel S. Goldberg, Max H. Goldhoff, Sarah Goldstein, Rachel Goodman, Francis Goodman, Anna Schwartz Gordon, Max Edward Gottlieb, Rose S. Green, Saul Greenberg, Nathan S. Gumanek, Michael M. Eisenberg, Moses Pincus Candell, Lauren Katzenstein, Hilda Kempler, Charles M. Cronson, Janice Lee, Linda Levine, Joseph Levy, Benjamin Lipoff, Sadie Meisel Lubash, Helen R. Mandel, J. Bert Marks, Viola Mendelson, Xenia Mayer, Lester Joseph Newman, Madeline Jill Parks, Max Pletman, Abraham Pober, Yechael Podolnik, Rose Rappaport, Morris B. Rubin, Bessie Rubin, Bertha Sarno, Arnold Schur, Bert Schnurer, Ruth Scheinberg, Samuel Cy Silver, Harvey Simon, Philip Stern, Anna C. Tenenbaum, Peter G. Valdez, Lillian Van Wy, Abbott J. Waldberg, Herman Wall, David Wilkes, and Lena Williamson. If I mispronounced your loved one's name, I invite you to say it again out loud. And if you'd like to add any additional names in the sanctuary, I invite you to do so as my hand passes where you are.
And so we join as one congregation and in one voice in the words of the Mourner's Kaddish, which can be found on page 294. Please rise if you are able. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabba, bi'alma divrach chirute v'yamlich malchute, b'chayachon uvyomechon uv'chaye dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala uvizman kari v'imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabba mivarach leolam al me'ol maya, yitzbarach v'yishtabach v'yitzpoar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudesha brechu, le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama Rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Zichronam levracha. May their memories forever be a lesson and a blessing for how we live our lives, and let us say amen. You may be seated. We are going to join in a moment in the closing song, but first we will do Kaddish and Motzi as we prepare our souls to hear some beautiful stories and some wonderful memories from our speaker this evening. It's truly an honor to be able to have you here tonight, Susan. I invite the congregation to please turn to page 4 for Kaddish. Vayhi erev vayhi boker yom hashishi, vayachulu hashamayim ve'aretz ve'echol tzivam, vayachol Elohim bayom hashvi'i mechol melachto asher asa, vayishbot bayom hashvi'i mechol melachto asher asa, vayevarech Elohim et yom hashvi'i, v'yekadesh oto ki vo shabbat mechol melachto Asher bara Elohim lasot savri.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu b'shabbat kodsho B'ahava uvratzon inchilanu, zikaron lemaseh v'reishit, ki hu yom tehila lemikra'ei kodesh, zecher lesiyat mitzrayim, ki Shabbat kodecha ve'ahava uvratzon hinchaltanu Baruch atah Adonai Mekadosh HaShabbat Mekadosh HaShabbat Mekadosh HaShabbat Mekadosh HaShabbat, Mekadosh HaShabbat, Mekadosh HaShabbat, Mekadosh HaShabbat, Mekadosh HaShabbat. Amen. L'chaim. It is good to have challah back up here. Cantor, we have dinner.
Thank God.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen.
Pat, thank you so much, and Maria, Jeannie, Paula, thank you all. We are going to join together now in the singing of Oseh Shalom as we begin to prepare for this evening's, our final Love of Legends, part of our centennial programming. In a moment, we will welcome up Susan Pasternak. I think really her claim to fame is that she's a new grandma, but I think that you may hear about some other incredible things this evening. So as we sing "O Say Shalom," Mark, I'm going to invite you up for my microphone. We'll set the chairs, and we invite everyone to please stay online. "O Say Shalom."
Join me. O say shalom b'romav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu. O say shalom b'romav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu. O say shalom b'romav, hu yaseh aleinu. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom. Shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom. Shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael. Shabbat shalom.
Maria, can you turn on my podium mic, please?
And Maria, don't leave because I'm giving you my mic.
Shabbat, no, yeah. Maria, thank you. We say on the ark, you see on the top of our ark, "Know before whom you stand." As your rabbi, it is a huge honor, but I know that I have come along a long line of rabbis, and rabbis who, in many and for many, have served as pivotal moments and people in their lives, who have watched them and who have guided them from truly the birth of their children or even themselves all the way through the end of their lives. And all of those rabbis have real lives also, not to say that their pulpit is not their real life, but we all have families, we have people we love, we have trials and tribulations, we have dark times and light times, and the people who know us don't allow us to get away with the title rabbi all the time. And so, Susan, you give me that smile, but I know as an RK, as a rabbi's kid, you know exactly what I'm talking about, as my RK talks to me right now. So I invite you up, Susan, to not only share some of your narratives and wisdoms of being an RK, but of being an incredible woman on your own 2 feet, as you are truly a gift of our congregation. Thank you. Yeah. Will be.
Me?
Yep.
I'd just like to say 2 things before we start. One, a special thank you to Norma and Michael Orovitz for this fabulous portrait, which I know had been destroyed, and they were kind enough to restore. And yes, I am a very proud grandparent, and I would like to join all of your blessings to me with my dear friends Kathy and Michael Graham, who are joining us this evening. We had our children together, and now we've just had our first grandchildren together. So, mazel tov to them too. Okay, now I'm ready.
So Shabbat Shalom, everybody, and I'm so pleased and happy to have Susan Gladstone Pasternak with us, who is the daughter of Rabbi Joseph Narrat. Now, if anyone may not know who that was or want to have a little recap, I'm going to give you a little recap of who that was. Rabbi Joseph Narrat became Temple Israel's rabbi in 1950, and he became one of the nation's great rabbis. Brilliant, learned, liberal, and outspoken. Rabbi Narrat became the voice of Judaism in South Florida, boldly speaking out for civil rights and against the Vietnam War. Rabbi Narrat was joined in 1952 by Temple Israel's first cantor, the beloved Jacob Bornstein. During Rabbi Narrat's tenure, Temple Israel grew to become one of America's largest synagogues, with approximately 1,800 families. On the high holidays, services were held, I'm sure you've heard this before, perhaps it's legendary, in the Miami Beach Convention Center. The temple became a leader in social action, hosting the first area meeting of Christian and Jewish clergy, the first formal contact between white and African American clergy, and the earliest formal encounters of Spanish-speaking and English-speaking clergy. You know, when I went to the biennial a couple of years ago, that's like the Reform movement's big convention, I remember seeing in the back of the room, during a Sunday morning on the prayer service, 3 men, and they were standing, and they were wearing prayer shawls on their head, they had tefillin, and they had a prayer book. And I was thinking, what would Rabbi Narrat say about that? I mean, what would he say about the resurgence of ritual in the Reform movement? I mean, I heard that he never wanted yarmulkes, kippot, either.
There were no kippot. There weren't even any what other synagogues called optionals in this synagogue in his lifetime. In his, I think I have to go back to the fact that he was born as an Orthodox Jew in Lithuania and made an intellectual choice at some point in his college years to study Reform Judaism, to make that switch. Many of us are Reform Jews because we were born into it. We didn't make some sort of an actual decision to change from conservative or Orthodox Judaism. But he truly believed that the basic tenet of Reform Judaism was tikkun olam, and to make a better world, and that was more important than the ritual, and that in fact, if I understand some of his writings, even if fear that focus on ritual would replace the focus on tikkun olam. So he was very staunch in his practice of traditional Reform Judaism, as had been begun in Germany in the 1850s. However, having said that, he did live long enough to see many, many changes in the congregation and to welcome them. Someone once asked me how he would feel about the way the congregation changed around the time Mitch Shefetz became the rabbi and brought in the Havarah. And I wrote a piece to Mitch in which I said, of his 5 children from 2 marriages, one was gay, one is married to someone from a different culture, one is married to someone from a different religion, one was a single mom raising children on her own, and only one of the 5 was leading a rather traditional Jewish life. And so he would have opened the doors to the synagogue, to the temple with joy, if only to allow in his own children, but, I wrote, he would hate the yarmulkes. And I honestly can't answer how he might have come to terms with the yarmulkes. I'm only going to give a supposition. I'm going to say this. He always taught me that Reform Judaism is not reformed with an ED.
Interesting. Yeah.
Because that would mean it was done. That a reformation had taken place and it was done. It's reform with no ED, because it is constantly changing to address the issues of the times. And if he perhaps saw that allowing people by their own choice, because that's another tenet of Reform Judaism, to wear a yarmulke, or for a girl to have a bat mitzvah, which didn't exist in my time, he might have been able to come to terms with it in the hopes of keeping Judaism alive for future generations. But that's only my supposition, and I welcome any Reform rabbis who may be listening to this to write in and say, no, he would still hate the yarmulkes.
Well, I want to go back a little bit, though. Rabbi Narrat spent a lot of time working on ecumenical councils, fostering relationships between Christian Jews. He writes about how he met a lot of resistance from the Jewish community as well as the Christian community. Why were these councils so important to him, do you think?
Well, again, this basic tenet of tikkun olam by which he lived his life. And if you'll forgive me, I just want to take a moment to read from the back of what I call my Joseph Narrat Bible, his book of sermons. He was the chairman of the Community Relations Board, president of the Miami chapter of the American Jewish Committee, president of the Dade County Welfare Planning Council, chairman of the Interfaith Agency for Social Justice, and he received throughout his lifetime numerous awards for all of his work in the community. And I think he believed very strongly that the role of a Reformed Jewish rabbi was to create a world in which all men are brothers and women.
And bridge the gap.
And bridge the gap and create a world where all could live together.
Well, Rabbi Narrat was an early proponent of welcoming the spouses of intermarried couples. He wrote, "We've got to take the chance to avoid the ghetto mentality." What was his professional and personal viewpoint on intermarriage in the Jewish community?
Well, again, all these answers that I'm giving you are things that I recall. Some are things I've actually been able to find writings about, but he believed that by allowing an interfaith couple to marry, but making a promise to raise the children in the Jewish faith, that he could keep another generation of Jews alive, that he would lose the Jewish member of that couple by not doing so. But he did extract that promise.
We spoke about this. I think that he was very foreseeing the future because eventually the reform movement caught up with him. And that's exactly what has happened since then. He also was a great proponent of civil rights for African Americans. And we know he participated a great deal in the civil rights movement. Why was that so important, you think, to him?
Well, again, as I mentioned, this general concept of togetherness, but I think what he felt was very important was that he be aware of everything that was happening in the world and try and have a part in fixing it or somehow making it better. And everything he saw, everything he read, every play he went to, every concert he attended, every book he read was fodder for him for a sermon, because he truly believed, and that's why this book I call sort of my Bible, that it was through his sermons that he could help guide his congregation in the ways of Tikkun Olam. But he was also a very big admirer of Dr. Martin Luther King, and he was quite devastated by his death. And I know that that inspired him even further.
Well, he served from 1950 through 1980, which is really a tumultuous time of great change in America as far as politically and culturally, in American history. It's a great things, great changes happened. I know he often spoke about current events and political causes from the pulpit. What were his viewpoints on the counterculture at that time and perhaps the Vietnam War?
Okay. So, as I was reviewing this book, I noticed that he wrote several sermons in a row, 1967, addressing the Vietnam War, addressing the turmoil of the youth of the time, which included his children, so he was seeing it firsthand, and relationships between the African American community and the Jewish community. He was very much opposed to the Vietnam War. He attended the Paris Peace Talks. He wrote a sermon in here as a prayer for all of the young men, because I really don't think there were very many women, and their families who were suffering from the Vietnam War. And then he expressed concern about two other things. He was very concerned that there was becoming a rift between the Black and the Jewish worlds, because there were people in the African American community who were expressing some anti-Semitism and some anti-Israel sentiments, and he was struggling with how to address that and deal with that. And then, as I said a minute ago, he was very concerned about the world in which young people were finding themselves, the turmoil it was costing them, and how was he going to be able to help?
Yeah, I mean, the rift in the African American community and the Jewish community at that time went on for quite a while, and I think it's being healed as the years go on, but it certainly was very real.
Right.
You mentioned Israel. I was interested in discovering that Rabbi Narrat was an early proponent of Zionism, which I hadn't known. The Six-Day War, we said, I know that happened during his tenure.
Right.
It's also, I was reading in his sermons as well, it was very impactful, apparently. While you were growing up, what was his relationship with the state of Israel?
So I know that he first visited Israel in 1950. But again, he was very, very impacted by the Six-Day War, less so by the Yom Kippur War, because his daughter, was living in Israel and got caught in the war, and he was a little bit
That's scary, very frightening.
Concerned about that. I say that as an anecdote, but I think if I understand his beliefs, he believed that it wasn't necessary for everybody to actually move to Israel, but it was important to be supportive of Israel, and that in fact Israel needed Americans and their support in order to survive. And so he was very supportive, but he did not necessarily believe that we all had to move there.
Okay. I want to get into a little bit about him as a man. A theme I noticed in many of his published sermons is alienation or loneliness. He talks about Camus and Sartre. He talks about Kierkegaard and all that. Was this a struggle for him, do you think?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm going to answer quite
simply.
Quite simply, and I'm going to turn to a page in his book. It was very important to him to be constantly on top. I have to say that honestly. It was important for him to be a great rabbi. That had meaning to him. And he acknowledged that the profession of being a great rabbi had some problems. And I'm going to read you what he wrote. The sickness of our profession is not that it asks us to respond to a variety of demands with eventual reasonable competence. The sickness of the rabbinate is rather that we are all too often ourselves fragmented inwardly by the very same frailties that we preach against in our congregants. So, to whom does the rabbi turn? To whom does the rabbi turn with all the issues that his congregants are turning to him? And he does mention in one of his writings that he did at some point turn to Freudian psychiatry, and that when he acknowledged that, it was met not positively by all.
Interesting, really. That would certainly have changed. Well, it reminds me of Eagleton and all that. Remember that time with McGovern?
Right.
What a shock that was for the people. Nowadays, it would be when people don't think about it. Well, Rabbi Narrat's sudden death was shocking and difficult for many in the community. Reverberated down for years, really. Can you tell us a little bit about that time and your family's reaction?
Okay. So I'm now speaking to you all very personally. Is that okay? So his death was not a shock to the family because we knew that he had been suffering from depression for many years. It just wasn't talked about. So if he had been suffering from cancer or had had a heart attack or a stroke, it would have been openly spoken about, and if it had been ongoing for a long period of time, say some form of cancer, everybody would have been commiserating with him and with his family, but it wasn't really an allowable problem. And so it was a secret from most of the congregation. Perhaps there were a few people with whom he confided, but he confided in the family and largely in me. I happened to be, at that period of time, the only one of the 5 children living in Miami, although I like to think it had something to do also with that we had a good relationship and he felt comfortable calling me.
How old were you at the time?
I'm sorry?
How old were you at the time when he was confiding in you?
From 21 to 26.
Young woman, yeah, okay.
But he, as I've said in the newspaper article and to others, he was a human being. He was a brilliant human being. He was so well educated. He was a magnificent orator, but he was a human being, and he suffered from an illness.
Did he have medication that helped him back then? I know nowadays we have a lot more.
Well, I myself am not really sure of all of the various things that may have been available to him. Remember, we're talking 42 years ago.
Right.
Things were very different in terms of what was available and with whom one could speak if you were Rabbi Narrat.
Right. Well, thank you for being so honest about that. That's, I think it helps people who suffer from depression.
Yes. I'm not quiet about the fact that it happened because I like to stress the fact that rabbis, as other great people, are they're human beings. They have
Right.
all the same issues in life that every other human being has.
They certainly do, and they take a lot of the congregation's
Right.
problems on with them. I want to jump into something, the way he saw things in life. 9 years after Rabbi Narrat's death, Temple Israel had its first female president. What was Rabbi Narrat's position on feminism, and how did he see the role of women in the synagogue?
So I would say, from my personal experience and things I know, that he was quite the feminist.
Really? Okay.
My mother had a career. Many rabbis' wives at that time, their career was being the rabbi's wife. My mother had her own career, which he supported. He had 3 daughters. He raised us all to believe that we could become and be whatever we wanted to be. He was alive when the first Reform rabbi, woman rabbi, was ordained, and he was very supportive of that. And although ritualistically he did not perform bat mitzvahs, he didn't actually perform very many bar mitzvahs either. He was a true believer in the concept of confirmation, and you had to really come to him with some kind of real, rational reason why you should have a bar mitzvah.
Not just to get presents or...
That's correct. It could not be just to have presents. But he was very much a feminist. And I want to share with you a story, she may be listening now, that Norma Orovitz shared with me, that he was very supportive of her going back to school and starting her own career. And he expressed to her, and I may be skipping some details, that it was very important to her that if she were to receive a degree or any sort of an award, she be acknowledged as Norma Orovitz, not Mrs. Michael Orovitz. There could be 5 or 10 Mrs. Michael Orovitzes, and so he wanted to make sure that she was acknowledged as Norma, the correct Mrs. Orovitz. And so he was definitely a feminist.
Okay, well, another thing which I think is really pretty amazing, most clergy in Miami back then, they espoused the socially accepted homophobia of the era. But Rabbi Narrat was very ahead of the curve on this and was an early proponent of gay rights when no one else was.
Yeah.
Can you expound on that a little?
Well, again, I'm going to share some personal information, but his oldest daughter was very active in the gay and lesbian movement in the late 60s and early 70s. And so he was already having these discussions and thoughts and sharing with his own daughter.
Oh.
And would be continuing. He now has 2 gay grandsons, and this would be something that would be part of his own family, and that he would, as I mentioned before, be responsive to, just in terms of helping his own family. But again, Tikkun Olam comes in, it's everywhere in his life, including
marginalized people and
marginalized people of any kind, right? So this would extend in today's world to all the different, as I mentioned before, all the different kinds of Jews who now come to pray.
Well, we know he was very big with Jewish African-American relations. How do you think he would deal with all the different races that kinds of people we have today in the Jewish world because of...
Right. I think he would say that's how we keep the Jewish world going, and that's why, again, it's Reform Judaism and not Reformed, because there are issues that are going to occur now that were not part of his life in 1950 when he started here, that he would see as being important for him to address.
I'm curious, you mentioned his daughter. Can you describe a little bit about your experiences growing up as the child of a rabbi,
as an
especially this
RK.
rabbi? Yeah.
As an RK.
Yeah.
So first of all, Rabbi Narrat married my mother when I was 7, and my brother was 5, and my sister was 3, and legally adopted us. But we took what then was an unusual name. We became Narratbergs. So Narrat was part of our legal name, but most people couldn't deal with that double name and kind of just called us Bergs. We had some friends who called us Nergs. So, but I mention that because my name everywhere I went was different than his. And I think that made a little bit of difference in my experience as a rabbi's daughter, because not everybody realized that I was.
So you had an out.
And the only thing that really upset him is if somebody would come home with me, a friend, and say to him, "Nice to meet you, Rabbi Berg." That would upset him very, very much. But it was incredibly interesting growing up in Joseph Narrat's home, because he lived such an interesting life. And if you're his child, it's your normal life, right? So he would say, "Go get ready for dinner. Isaac will be here in a few minutes." And in would walk Isaac Bashevis Singer, and we would have dinner. His mentor was a rabbi named Solomon Freehoff, with whom he would study. I think you're going to ask me that question. He would come for dinner all the time. Allen Ginsberg came for dinner. Itzhak Perlman came for dinner. I mean, and we didn't really think twice. This was like, this is just how kids live their lives. The other thing that was really interesting is that in the early 60s, there wasn't really I-95 yet. And people like to get married in the rabbi's study, his office here. But if they lived all the way south, that was a really big schlep. So he offered up the living room of our house as his southern study. And we all knew if we were to come home from school and see 10 or 12 cars in the parking lot, that there was a wedding, and that we needed to go in the back door and assume our jobs. One of us had to keep the dog quiet. One of us had to answer the telephone. But
So
this was a regular part of our lives.
So
When someone said to me once, "Have you been to many weddings?" I said, "I can't tell you how many weddings I've been to."
Well, you mentioned Rabbi Freehoff.
Yes.
You said he and your father studied Talmud together.
Yes.
So, which makes me wonder, what was his relationship with Torah study in general?
Yes, okay. So Rabbi Freehoff, for those of you who may not know, was, my father used to call him the Pope of Reform Judaism. He was from Pittsburgh. His congregation was Rodef Shalom, and it was really the heart of classical Reform Judaism in the United States. He was older than my father, so he was my father's mentor, and he wintered here during the last decade of my father's life. And every day when he was here in the winter, the two men would study Talmud. And at some point, I suppose that seemed odd. Mm-hmm. But what I've come to realize is that it was important to both of them for two reasons. One is to understand the decisions you're making. If you're making a decision not to follow something, you need to know what it is. You're not just saying, I'm not going to do this because I don't want to. You're doing it because you've studied it and you've made an intellectual decision to do something else. And the other important tenet is the importance of taking the lessons of old and translating them into the problems of now.
Yeah, that can certainly be a challenging thing to do, but he was able. That's interesting. So he used the Talmud then as a kind of a basis.
Yes.
For
and he just loved to study and read and write. I have to tell you one other thing about growing up in Rabbi Narrat's house. The typewriter was constantly clacking. All right, this is pre-computers, right? It was just a regular, it wasn't even an electric typewriter. And we all remembered falling to sleep every night to the sound of the typewriter, waking up to the sound of the typewriter, because he was writing sermons. His sermons were so important to him, and books and articles, and constantly typing.
Wow, that's a lullaby. I was thinking about, we mentioned before about Cantor Bornstein, and you mentioned to me his partnership with him and also the executive director, Ed Cohen. What was that like?
Yes.
How was their relationship?
So some of you who may be listening may remember the three of them. Ed Cohen was the temple administrator, Jack Bornstein was the cantor, and Joe Narrat was the rabbi. They had a wonderful partnership. They were together constantly, and I've been told anecdotes. They ate lunch every single day together at what was then the S&S Cafe, or the cafeteria on the corner of Biscayne. And they shared their thoughts and their ideas, and he has thanked them in writing for supporting him in many of his endeavors.
Yeah, so
they were a great team.
The triumvirate.
Yes, yes. And they all suffered personal loss in their lives. They each lost a child. I just thought there were some things that drew them together, aside from their religion and their practice of Judaism and their running of the synagogue, but just some deeply personal,
that emotional
things
connection.
That drew them together as three men.
Just getting back to Rabbi Narrat's early life for a second. He was born in Lithuania to an Orthodox family.
Right.
So what was his relationship with Orthodoxy in general?
So I'm going to say that I'm not 100% sure. He was born in Lithuania in a town, I believe, I'm not going to pronounce it right, Svinonius, something close to that, about 8 miles outside of Vilna, where there were a lot of Narratskis, which was his actual name.
Oh, really? Okay. He was a Litvak.
Yes.
He said, yeah.
And I actually have it with me. I found the ship manifest. Okay. And the interesting thing about it is his name wasn't Joseph. Some of you may have known this. His name was Kula. C-U-L-A.
That was his first name?
Yes.
That's a name?
It says here.
Okay.
I've tried. He was Kula, and he was 8, and then the rest of the family members were age 20, 15, 48, 18, 11. And so I'm not sure which one it is his mother. His mother was on this ship. Yeah. His father appears to have been Jacob Naratsky. So, and they had family already in Warren, Ohio, a very small town. So, but that's where they went.
Oh, they went directly there. They didn't go
Yes.
to Little Eastside or anything.
No,
Okay.
they went to
Interesting.
Warren, Ohio.
Interesting.
And he eventually changed his name to Narrat, which I never asked him this, but it's very similar to Narrat, candles. And his brother became Norton.
Ah,
So, yeah, they changed their names from Naratsky.
Narratsky, yeah.
He went to Case Western Reserve and then to Hebrew Union College. So somewhere in that period of time, perhaps at Case Western Reserve, he made this intellectual switch from the ritual of Orthodoxy to the Tikkun Olam of Reform Judaism.
Well, I found a sermon from 1954, and he says, the rabbi usually looks upon himself to one degree or another as walking in the footsteps of Amos and Isaiah, the prophets. Social justice is his meat and bread.
I'm so sorry.
Okay. Would you say that social justice was his passion?
Yes.
And where do you think that sprung from?
So, yeah, thank you. I'm sorry, I have too many papers.
You really do.
Yes, I believe that social justice was his, and
His
I
passion.
keep saying tikkun olam, but was his passion. I believe that he believed that a Judaism frozen in time could not coexist with living in a modern world, and that it must change and adapt to survive. And
Well, I mean,
am I answering that question?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I found another quote we spoke of before. I wasn't going to talk. He writes, "Only a world devoted to justice for all will be a secure world for the Jew," which
Yes.
I can interpret to mean
Yes.
it combats even combats anti-Semitism.
Anti-Semitism, yes.
You know, so go on.
No, I'm
Okay.
just looking at some of my notes that you asked me before, but I wrote down here that he believed in something called audacious hospitality, which was inviting in all Jews by choice, by color, by sexual orientation, by disability, by any kind of...
Well, like we said, he was really a thinker of things before the time, because audacious hospitality became the mantra
Yeah.
of modern-day Reform Judaism. Absolutely. I heard it announced in 2016 or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's something that certainly has become the standard, I think, in Reform
Yes.
Judaism.
Yeah.
Finally, I want to ask about, this is your opinion about this. What was Rabbi Narrat's perception of God? How would you say that it evolved?
Okay, so this is an interesting question for me. I knew, and Norma Orovitz mentioned to me, so she knew as well, that he considered himself an agnostic.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, in his later years, he began a great interest in Reconstructionist Judaism. And he began meeting with Mordecai Kaplan, who was the founder of Reconstructionist Judaism, because in Reconstructionist Judaism, there's not so much a belief of a personal God. It's more of a belief of a spiritual God, a being that works to make life better, not so much a personal God that I'm going to pray to every day. However, the conflict, as I see it, and was also explained to me by a friend of mine, Rabbi Howard Berman, I'd like to acknowledge his help. The Reconstructionist movement continued with much of the ritual as a way of identifying as Jews. And so he would have had a conflict between liking the way that Reconstructionist Judaism believed in God, but not liking the ritual.
So maybe he liked the ideology, but not the practice.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Interesting.
But he engaged in the discussion. He engaged in the intellectual pursuit. And I think that's such an important thing to know about him, is even if it troubled him, even if he was unsure about it, he would engage. He would engage in the discussion, in the reading, in the researching. And
But isn't that what we want to do in Judaism? Wrestle
Yes.
with these ideas, wrestle with them. There's no,
Yes.
the answers, the questions are more important than the answers, I always think.
yes,
don't you? So,
yes, you
know.
might say that same thing.
Yeah. Well, Susan, thank you so much for being so forthright and honest and telling us really, I think you brought your father alive a little bit beside the beautiful
Yeah.
portrait. I wanted to open up a little bit to questions. Can we have any questions from the, Rabbi, go
Maria,
ahead.
so I just want to real quickly thank you both, but Mark, really, thank you for your preparation and the professionalism you brought to this, but also the
Yes.
human level. I mean, this really, I obviously could never have met your father, and so to get a glimpse of him through you and through your questioning, thank you both for all you've done. We have time for very few questions, and I'm so excited that you have so many, and so I would ask you also to email
Okay.
Susan and see if she could answer you with the thought that she put towards this evening. Thank you, Susan, for
Right.
preparing so well. I'm going to go ahead and ask your friend who came. Yes, please. Yeah.
Now that you said that he changed from Orthodoxy during college. When I went away to college, I had a boyfriend who convinced me to be agnostic. So I go home Christmas and I tell my mother, "Mother, I'm an agnostic." To which she's, oh, you know. So she goes, "Joe, what are we going to do with Phyllis? She says she's an agnostic." Listen to his answer. "Helen, she's a freshman in college. We wouldn't want her any other way." That's your father's
Yeah.
brilliance.
Yeah. Excellent.
Beautiful.
Thank you. Yes, Lee. Hold on one sec, Lee.
If he walked in today, I would have loved to have known him. He sounds like a fantastic person. I'm sorry that I didn't. But if he walked in today, what do you think he would be surprised about in terms of this temple, Temple Israel of Greater Miami?
Well, he would definitely be surprised by the yarmulkes. I just can't stress that enough. And a lot of the change in ritual. He may, were he walk in today and see what's going on in the world, be able to make sense of it, but prior to learning all the reasons behind it, he'd be shocked.
I think the music would surprise him too.
So,
I only met him for I was in school coming back and forth from New York, and I met him on many occasions, especially when I was at the South Branch. I was the cantorial soloist at the South Branch. Actually, they called me a student cantor. We only had a few brief encounters, but I was always in awe of him. I mean, to me, he was a giant. And he was so well respected in this community, and people admired him so much. And I've always, it's not unusual in very brilliant people that they also are deeply sensitive and often have depression, because in order to think on a level so high, you have to be so in touch with the world around you, and you have to hear and see things that other people don't see. It takes a toll on who you are. So his brilliance and his depression, to me, went hand in hand, and I know he was suffering for a long time.
yeah, that makes sense. And I just want to add, just as a last statement, for those of you who never got to hear him, and there was a recording that was played here on the 90th anniversary of Jack Bornstein singing and my father speaking. Were you here, some of you? I hadn't heard him speak, in all these years. Such a magnificent, really he sounded like Richard Burton, doing Hamlet. And it was, so not only the words that he delivered in his sermons, but the way in which he presented them to the congregation, and especially in the convention center where there were 2,500 people, was very dramatic. And people have asked me if he talked to me like that at home. Did he sound like Hamlet asking me to get him a glass of water? I said, not quite, but he did have a very distinctive,
Well,
very
certainly-
distinctive voice.
Certainly a lot of gifts. So you're
Yes.
gifted with not only his intellect, but also the ability to project it and have that voice. So
You know, I think we can hear about all these gifts that Rabbi Narrat had, and I think that the biggest gift you've given us is that he also was your dad. And I think that that's something we all need
That's
to
correct.
think about, is he was a human being,
Right.
and he did so much for this
Right.
congregation. So I want to thank both of you for all of your work, but also all of your honesty and your vulnerability. And I
Thank
want to
you.
thank everyone at home also for all of your chats throughout. And Paula, thank you for running that, and Maria, thank you for staying on. I encourage you all to email Susan with any additional questions
Would
that
you like
have.
me to give you my email address?
Yes, please.
Okay. So you can email me at the Jewish Museum, and I do think he would be very proud that I have that position. And so my email is sgladsto@fiu.edu.
So it is going in the chat. S. Gladstow.
Yes. Michael Graham.
Particularly about Rabbi Narrat, and this really brought it alive for me.
I guess I'm the only person here who, the two of us were here when Rabbi Narrat was here.
Yeah.
I remember a couple of things that as you were talking, I just was filled with memories. There was a guy with a yarmulke, and he used to sit in the second row. The seats went across, and it wasn't just a yarmulke.
Yeah.
The second thing I remember is nobody got up during a sermon here.
Right.
I mean, that was, there were no kids cried, and nobody moved. And the
That's
third
true.
thing I remember is the divisiveness. And I was on the board in 1969 and 1970 when I was a student, a medical student here. They put me on the board for summer. And there was a big division in the temple with the Vietnam War. The assistant rabbi who went to California, I can't remember his name.
Steve Jacobs.
Yeah, he was, really anti-war, and there were a lot of older members of the synagogue who had fought in World War II, and the two ringmasters were Marty Fine, who was the chairman of the board, and your father, and it was a big deal. I mean, we obviously knew where your dad stood, but it was a pretty big deal in the synagogue then. Anyway, the remembrances were just incredible.
that's
when we were
wonderful.
talking.
Thank you.
Thank
That's really
you.
wonderful.
Thank you.
And
I
thank
just wanna-
you, Mark.
Thank you.
And thank you,
as well.
Susan, and thank you, Rabbi, and thank you, Mark Lamb. Thank you all.
So we just want to say Shabbat Shalom. I hope you'll join us tomorrow morning for our bar mitzvah at 10 a.m., followed by Torah study at 11:30, led by Mark Lamb again. Or you could stay in the service for Torah study tomorrow night as TI goes to camp. TI goes to camp, and we will see you all for Havdalah and barbecue for that.